Greetings from Philadelphia. My name is Franklin, Benjamin Franklin. The building you see behind me is the Pennsylvania State House. It was my honor and privilege to spend a sweltering summer there from May through September in 1787. And there were 55 delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies that came together to answer the question, now that we've thrown off the yoke of Mother England, how shall we govern ourselves? And there was a lot of heated debate and a lot of work and a lot of effort went into it, and the results of that summer were the Constitution of the United States. So as I was coming out of the building one day, a woman said to me, "Sir, what have you given us?" And I looked at her and I said, "Madam, we have given you a republic if you can keep it." What I want to do today is I want to go inside to the assembly room and talk about what is a republic, why did we give you a republic, what else could we have given you, and why the warning, "Madam, if you can keep it." So let's go inside to the assembly room and talk about all these issues and get a glimpse into what transpired that important summer that resulted in one of the most important documents ever created in the history of mankind. So let's go inside. Here we are in the assembly room. In many ways, this room was the center of the revolution and the formation and birth of a great nation, the United States of America. But before we can fully understand the Constitution and the process that went on that summer, we have to really go back 50, 60, 100 years to understand what was going on in the colonies, what were the kind of people that were coming here, and how did that play a part in the revolution and subsequently the creation of this important document. I had the divine appointment of being here during that time. I was born in Boston in 1706 on Milk Street across from the Old South Church. My parents immigrated from England in 1683. So you see, they were Puritans who were already rebelling against what went on in England. They were against the English church, where the king had control of everything that was sacred, and the king was also in charge of everything that was secular. And the people that came here in those 100 years were all people who didn't like the political, social, and economic structure of England. My father was an excellent example. He was a silk dyer in England, and when he came here, lo and behold, there just weren't enough royalty to make a living out of silk dyeing. So he transformed himself into a candle maker, and I was apprenticed to him for quite some time being a candle maker. If you've ever boiled down tallow, you know you don't want to be a candle maker. But they were Puritans, and Puritans believed that each individual congregation should be running their own affairs. Pastors were preaching that from the pulpit for 50 years before the revolution started. So that was the backdrop. All of the colonist people had rejected what went on in England, came here to start a new life. Well, that new life, the cornerstone of that new life was liberty, making choices and decisions for themselves, their local churches making choices and decisions. And when we experience increasing tyranny on the part of Mother England, the natural thing to do was to resist it. So it all culminated in 1753 when a group of colonists protesting the tea tax went into ships in Boston Harbor and dumped all the tea overboard. Well, the king kind of overreacted to that and sent some 30,000 sailors and army to put down the rebellion. Well, all it did was ferment the rebellion. King George III said, "The revolution was due to that evil genius, Mr. Franklin." Well, that was great flattery, and I appreciated it, but it showed a lack of understanding about what was going on. It was not Dr. Franklin, it was him and his oppressive government. So already we see the seeds of the revolution went on long before the revolution itself. And it culminated with the shooting of citizens in the streets at Lexington Concord. So the Great War was on. 8 bloody years the thing dragged on. The king thought he could put it down in 3 to 4 months. Finally, it culminated at Yorktown when Cornwallis was defeated. So they signed a treaty. I had the privilege of helping to negotiate it and be involved in it and sign it on behalf of the colonies. So I had the privilege of signing the Declaration, the Constitution, and the Peace Treaty. So that's kind of the backdrop that you see that led up to the creation of this document. And you see here, "We the people," large print. That is on purpose. That's not a typographical error. That's a statement of how we, the representatives who met that summer, viewed the process of governance. Okay, so now on to the Constitution a little bit. If you use King George III as the backdrop for the creation of this document and the Revolution. He would have been somebody who would have been way off on the left side of the spectrum of politics. The rule of one person. That's what he saw. He was the supreme dictator. He would tell the colonies how to run their affairs, and all the way down to putting stamps on their envelopes and on their documents in order to pay him a tax. The tea that you drank would be taxed. So that was what the Revolution started out to be all about, was no taxation without representation. But it was much more. It was about religious freedom. We did not want to be a part of the Anglican Church. We did not want anybody telling us how to worship. We believed that we had a relationship directly with God and that we did not have to go through the king or any other earthly leader in order to have a relationship with God. Okay, so we put King George way over on the left, and that was the dictatorship, the rule of one, called tyranny. Maximum government, minimum liberty. And before we convened here in May, the early part of 1787, there was a group of people in central and western Massachusetts, led by a man named Daniel Shays. And Daniel Shays was up in arms, literally, concerning taxing farmers who did not have any hard currency, for they couldn't pay their taxes. There were lots of things going on in the colonies after the Revolution. Individual colonies were printing their own money. There was great debt. There was great turmoil. So Daniel Shays attempted to stop the foreclosures that were going on with farms and land by shutting down the court system. It became known as Shays' Rebellion. So he kind of created a circumstance where he believed in anarchy. A certain amount of anarchy was good. Well, that end of the spectrum is way on the right. And what that creates is the maximum individual liberty, the minimum amount of government, but also the maximum amount of chaos. So there we have it, the two extremes. King George III, the rule of one, on the left, and Daniel Shays and his revolutionaries on the right, the rule of no one. Now that's the spectrum that defines the way that a government can be run. So now there's lots of things in between those two extremes. And no one agrees that the rule of one person is correct, and no one agrees that the rule of no one is correct. So somewhere in between, the right amount of government ensures everyone's liberty and allows for the maximum opportunity for prosperity. As the Declaration of Independence said, we are endowed with our Creator with these unalienable rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So in crafting the Constitution, we were looking for that medium between total anarchy and total government that allowed the most people to have the most freedom to prosper and run their own affairs. Okay, one of the popular words that has always been is democracy. So there were lots of people that said, oh, let's be a democracy. Democracy is the rule of the majority. So everybody gets together and we all have a vote. But many of the representatives that sat there that summer knew that democracy had a history of violent death. What happened was the mob rule finally took over and decided that they could get money for themselves out of the public coffers. And so the whole thing degenerates into oligarchy and ultimately tyranny. So democracy, the word democracy does not appear in this document. It does not appear in the constitutions of any of the 13 colonies. And it was not our intention to give you a democracy. Had I given you a democracy, the woman in the street, when she asked me, what have you given us, sir? I would have said something like, a democracy, madam. Let the chaos begin. Okay, but that is kind of in the middle between the two extremes. Other things that are in the middle, a little bit toward the left, are oligarchy, which is the rule of the few. The ruling elite come to power and usually link up with a king, because the king can't run everything by himself. The dictator can't do everything. So an oligarchy is really related to the tyranny end of the spectrum, where a few people are making decisions on the behalf of everybody else. Alexander Hamilton was in favor of such a setup. He thought the delegates and the ruling elite of the colony should be in charge. But we the people prevailed. Okay, another possibility is libertarianism, which is toward the other end of the spectrum, where the government that governs least governs best. And how far toward the right can you push that until you start to infringe on anarchy. But libertarians believe that there should be very, very little government and that most people should be in charge of their lives. Okay, now comes the real question. Where in the middle is it exactly right, and what is that called? It's called a republic. Republic means the public thing, the law, the rule of law. So we attempted to create a republic where law governed the behavior of men, and men were not running everything like King George III. So the republic, or the public thing, was the rule of law. And that is what we attempted to give you with the creation of the Constitution. The other founding document that was always an integral part of the life of the colonies was the Bible. And much of what went into this document was a result of what was said in scriptures. If you believe that men are basically evil, as Scripture says, then the purpose of the Constitution and the purpose of government is to limit their behavior. So we set up a federalist system whereby the power of the central government was limited and defined, and most of the power went to the states and to the people. Because every time you create an opportunity for vain and evil men to aspire to take it over, they will. So that gets us to the second part of my answer to the woman in the street. Why did I say to her, if you can keep it? So if we look at this spectrum of possibilities for governance, there are always people wanting it to move to the anarchy end, and there are always people wanting to take over to move it to the tyranny end. So a vigilant, educated, moral electorate and society is necessary to maintain a republic. A republic, madam, if you can keep it. So every generation must reinvent the republic. They must come to understand the spectrum that I've talked about, their role in it, and how can they preserve the republic for the next generation. So each generation must reinvent, recommit to maintaining, building, and adjusting the republic. So the Constitution allows for provisions for making modifications as more information becomes available. So you will always get to the point of either anarchy on the one end or tyranny on the other. Vain and aspiring men will always be part of the population who want to take it over for their own purposes, who love the power and control, and it is up to we the people to stand up and make sure that the republic is preserved. So if in your lifetime the republic comes under attack, the question is, what will you do to reinforce the republic and save it for future generations? That's the critical question of the day, and I thank you very much for listening, and I thank you for your time.